Hi, everyone. It's 10 o'clock and time to get started. I'm Nancy Langton, Associate Dean of Accreditation and Strategic Initiatives at the Lewis College of Business, Brad D. Smith Schools of Business at Marshall University. I'm excited to be with you today. Welcome to the Herd Insight Small Business Webinar Series. We thank you for taking the time to attend this event. It's part of a webinar series given by Lewis College of Business faculty and local business professionals. The series showcases the combined expertise of our best faculty and seasoned and knowledgeable practitioners from the business community in which we engage. The goal of the series is to help small businesses achieve success in a changing and dynamic business environment. Before we start the event today, I would like to introduce former Lewis College of Business Dean and current interim provost Avi Mukherjee to say a few words about the college and its mission.
Thank you, Nancy, and welcome everyone to this exciting event. We appreciate your interest in this Herd 2020 Insights Small Business Webinar Series. The mission of the Lewis College of Business and its Brad D. Smith Schools of Business is to promote economic development in the regional community and beyond. We do this by implementing our strategic priorities for external engagement and economic development, including lifelong learning programs, the Business Leadership Symposium, the Dean's Distinguished Speaker Series, and the CEO panel that many of you have attended. The college has several outstanding undergraduate, graduate, and doctoral programs, and has several outreach centers, including the Center for Entrepreneurship and Business Innovation, or the I-Center, that helps small businesses innovate with a focus on design thinking techniques, the Transformative Sales and Service Excellence Center that imparts state-of-the-art sales training and education, and the BB&T Center for Leadership that promotes consulting and research opportunities between students and the community. The college also cooperates with the Brad D. Smith Business Incubator to help promote entrepreneurship throughout the region. As the state and the nation start rebuilding businesses and economies coming out of the pandemic closures and lockdown, the Lewis College of Business is committed to supporting our local businesses, alumni, and other stakeholders in re-engaging, recharging, and redesigning their business models. Hence, we have developed this webinar series that will consist of thought-provoking presentations throughout the academic year and into the summer, approximately every 2 weeks. We hope that you enjoy today's webinar and take something out of it to use in your business or professional activities to make West Virginia and the surrounding area a better place for business and community engagement. Dr. Nancy Langton will now introduce today's speakers.
Thanks, Avi. Today's informative and engaging presentation is titled High Tech and Small Business, the Nexus of the Next Federal Deal. It is brought to you by Dr. Tracy Cristofaro and business professional Jonathan McAllister. Dr. Tracy Cristofaro is a professor of technology management here in the College of Business. She has over 20 years of experience in project management, administration, and consulting. Jonathan is the director and program manager of Peraton's Space and Intelligence Division. He is the recipient of NASA's Stennis Space Center Small Business Advocate of the Year Award. Tracy and Jonathan will explain high tech in small businesses and the nexus of the next federal deal. Please feel free to ask questions via the chat function throughout the presentation. Tracy and Jonathan will answer these questions at the end. I now turn it over to our presenters.
Good morning, and thank you, Drs. Mukherjee and Langton. Thank you, Alina, for facilitating all of this, and certainly thank you, Jonathan, for participating. We're going to break this presentation into 2 parts. I'll do the first part, talking about my background and a small business perspective, and then I'll turn it over to Jonathan, who will talk about the federal contracting perspective. I personally have been at Marshall now for 14 years as a professor and program coordinator for first the technology management graduate degree, and then more recently I have moved into business where I am the program coordinator for the MIS degree. Prior to joining Marshall 14 years ago, I spent 20 years as a project manager for large corporations in the Fortune 2 and smaller. Also worked for government and in healthcare and higher education. I moved my way up the corporate ladder. I went from manager of program methodology and standards to director of consulting and training services to the vice president of sales and technical support for a large $3 billion organization. Then I decided it was time to move on from corporate America and start my own small business, being a small woman-owned consulting business. And I went over both private and public contracts. Never, though, did I ever go into looking for federal contracts because I was far too intimidated. I did, however, do state contracts. The first thing I learned when moving from the corporate world into small business is that you have to know who you are. What do you want to be? What do you have to offer, and why people would choose you over a different organization? This is often known as an elevator pitch. And an elevator pitch is something that you could answer these questions to someone theoretically in an elevator for 30 seconds or less between floors. So if you meet someone in the elevator and they ask how you are and what you're doing, you have a succinct statement that talks about you and your products and services and what makes you different from your competitors. So there's a formula that you can use for doing these elevator pitches. The first is, who is your target customer? You want to narrow it down to be manageable. Of course, we would like to sell to everyone in the entire world, but really you have to be able to narrow your target. And you can have multiple elevator pitches depending on the situation and who you're speaking with at the time. You also need to have a compelling need. What's going to make the customer interested? And in 30 seconds, you can't go into a whole lot of detail. So you have to be very succinct in what that compelling need is. And you need a name. Having a name makes it real, not just for you, but it makes it real for whoever you're talking to in your elevator. What category in the market are you? It narrows the field so that you know that the person you're speaking with is in that market and it's going to address their needs. What is one key benefit? Where's their pain? Are you looking to just give an aspirin to make them temporarily feel well? Or is this something that's really going to addict them to your product and service? Who are your competitors? Come up with at least one name of someone who you can compete with that makes it real for the organization if they haven't heard about you in the past. And then finally, it's the why you. What's one unique differentiator that's going to set you apart from the others? So if we look at putting this together into a structure, the structure would be, or could be, for whoever you had identified as your target customer, who has whatever that customer need is. Your product name is whatever the market is that you are pursuing, that, and your one key benefactor or benefitter, unlike its whatever the competitor's name is, your product or service provides that unique differentiator. Let's do an example. Let's say I want to build a better mousetrap. So if I were to fill in the blanks, I could say, for the homeowner who has the desire for a better mousetrap, no mouse in my house is a live trap that safely disintegrates 24 hours after occupancy, thus letting its captive loose in an outdoor location. Unlike Tomcat or the other brands, the No Mouse in My House product provides an environmentally and personally safe and nearly terror-free mouse relocation product. So if you look at this, being able to fill in the blanks, I could say that within 30 seconds. It hits all the key factors that the person who you're speaking to understands what you are, what you sell, who you are, and what difference you make. When we finish this, the next thing after you know who you are, what you would want to do is to come up with a business plan. And there are lots of organizations and lots of places on the web that can help you develop a business plan. It can be pretty simple. The Small Business Association, for example, has 4 key questions that you would answer. And if you've done an elevator pitch, as previously discussed, you can answer those questions pretty easily. But when you think about a business plan, it's not just for new businesses. If you currently are a small business owner, you can look at your business plan, develop a business plan if you don't have one, because that is the resume of your business, and it should be reviewed and updated frequently. It forces logic and a disciplined look at what you're doing and what you could do in the future. So again, you want to tell that compelling story, the who, what, when, where, and how, and why potential investors or prospective customers and clients would look to you. It's that living document that you review often and update as necessary. You also need to be out there and research potential opportunities and contracts and funding. You want to stay current in the industry. And certainly once you determine who you are and what you have to offer and why you, it's time to start deciding if looking at federal or state contracts is for you. And the federal aspect is what we're going to talk about today. With that, I'd like to introduce Jonathan McAllister, who lives in that world of federal contracting. And I'll turn it over to Jonathan to take it from here.
Hey, thanks, Dr. Cosfera. Just a mic check. You can hear me 5 by 5, right?
Yes, sir.
Oh, copy. All right. So I appreciate the time and really appreciate and I'm flattered that Marshall University would ask us to attend this event. As indicated, just to be honest, I'm a little less structured in my speaking than the previous speaker, so I apologize for that. But so this will be a little loose in some ways, but hopefully effective for the team. So I'm Jonathan McAllister. I am actually a Marshall graduate. I graduated twice from Marshall, once in undergraduate, which I barely got out with the skin of my teeth, and then was fortunate enough to return to a master's degree in technology management from Marshall University. I'm I'm 47 years old, so I've been doing IT for a significant amount of time. Really cut my teeth at Marshall University. Had a great experience there both times, and I'm very familiar with the Huntington area. Specifically, in the past 10 years, I've really focused, I kind of just happened into it, but into federal contracting with large companies. So previous to that, I've been with Dell's consulting division. Previous to that, Perot Systems consulting division. And for about the past nearly 11 years, I've been with a group that is ultimately become Peraton. We had a legacy, the company I worked for was legacy from Hewlett Packard's consulting all the way through and now Peraton. I've really focused on federal contracts, and as a native West Virginian who still lives in West Virginia, I've become acutely sensitive to the fact that a significant amount of dollars exists out there for small businesses, and that the barriers to entry for that can seem significant. So the math behind me doing this discussion isn't to, return to the university I graduated from and feel good about myself from the economics perspective. It's actually to really talk and hopefully hit and land with a few smalls who might be interested, to help them understand that the barrier to entry to federal contracting is much lower than they might perceive, and to encourage West Virginia or regional smalls who might be interested in this type of work to dive in and engage, because it's a great opportunity. I am, just to cite the presentation there, I am the director and a program manager within our Peraton Space and Intelligence Division. So that means space infrastructure from ground systems. So if you think about antennas that point at satellites as they pass over and download data from those satellites, whether it's weather data or other data, I support systems related to that all the way through to intel. So that's classified work related to national defense and national security, which we'll be briefly talking about some of these things today. But if I were you folks, I'd want to know, like, hey, why is this person here, and what grounds upon which do they even have to tell me what I should do, and why should I listen, right? So I'm not purporting to be the expert, but what I am purporting to say is I've been doing this and engaging with smalls for the entirety of the 11 years I've been doing this in the federal space, and I've had a lot of fun doing it. So the slide here is, again, not an exercise in economics so much as to say, listen, I'm also from West Virginia, graduated from Marshall, and these types of things that you see on the screen are much more accessible than you might think to anyone who's willing to put the time in. These are some of the more fun experiences on the photo there. So in the top left is at the Jet Propulsion Lab. I have a visitor's badge on there because that day I had forgotten my badge in the hotel. But I'm there at the JPL lab, and that is the Mars rover that's used here on Earth to run test sequences before the same command sequence is sent to the one on Mars, just to make sure that by the time you send the commands. On the right is a demilitarized weapons platform that has been kind of a swords into plowshares technology move, where NASA basically took a Global Predator, which is a large weapons platform, autonomous, basically remotely flown vehicle, about 1,000 horsepower engine out back. And she's been converted into a Hurricane Hunter there to do science. And the bottom is one of the things I'm more proud of. That is Charlie Duke from Apollo 16. That was at a dinner right before COVID. I had the opportunity to meet with him and speak to him about technology. I would tell you that in all these pictures, as exciting as they are, to me at least, and that's the Mars rover yard at the Jet Propulsion Lab in the bottom right, by the way, where they test the rover and simulate Mars conditions. The accessibility of this to small businesses, to this ecosystem of business, is much more accessible than you might think. On that rover that I'm pointing to in the top left, a significant portion of the instrumentation and the IT and data processing that is done on it, as well as project management, program management, and other services, are provided actually by small businesses. It may seem, in looking at this series of photos, that, gosh, this is really high tech, and I'm in West Virginia, and I'm a small business that isn't even close to that yet. What I would say is, between Marshall University and the Brad C. Smith School of Business, as well as local organizations such as the Robert C. Byrd Institute for Flexible Manufacturing, who can really be force multipliers, this type of business, if you're interested in it, and the revenue that's associated with it, is well within your grasp as a small. And using the university as well as other force multipliers like the Robert C. Byrd Institute or similar, I can't encourage you enough, because the boundaries to entry are much lower than you think. These are just some more photos. That's a moon rock in the top right. That is a vacuum chamber in the left, and in the center is a machine shop, very similar to Robert C. Byrd Institute machine shop, actually at the Jet Propulsion Lab in Pasadena, California. I was in there to do a tour one day. And again, I'm just trying to give you a flavor for some of the accessibility here. So frame of reference, context and the scope around federal contracting. U.S. government procures a substantial amount of services of every type and variety to conduct the business of government. So that includes everything from project managers to people who supply facilities and grounds maintenance. So they literally work on the water sprinklers, all the way through to, gosh, we really need a drill that can drill in core samples on Mars, and we need a business to do that. The federal government also has very rigid regulation, as most of these smalls on the call probably know, around how those contracts are awarded. So how are those dollars transferred and given to businesses? And there's significant rigid, what I call rigid regulation and rigor, also known as the FAR, Federal Acquisition Regulations, that are followed. What's nice about that rigidity is it creates a level playing field for small businesses across the nation. If you are a small business who is in New York City or Washington, D.C. or Miami or some other perceived metro epicenter, and you're in West Virginia, you may feel, gosh, those people really have an advantage over me. But what's nice about FAR, Federal Acquisition Regulation, and the rigid regulation is it creates a level playing field, meaning that companies, small businesses in the West Virginia region, Southern Ohio, Eastern Kentucky, they actually have a pretty level playing field because of that structure of what's called fair and open competition. The federal government wants to ensure that all small businesses across the country have fair and open competition to any contract that's getting awarded. And entire ecosystems of that business exist. So each agency, NOAA, NASA, who I work closely with, Department of Homeland Security, go through the list, they are required to do this. And not only that, they have a small business utilization requirement. So many contracts, when they're put out for bid, even if they're going to be awarded to a company like I work for, Peraton, and let's say the deal size we usually deal in is 100 million up, right? So the last deal I did was $400 million in TCV, or total contract value. The federal government often requires, including NASA, that we may have to set aside 20 to 30% of that 400 million and give it to a small. We are required per those rigorous regulations that we're talking about. So what happens is smalls are often not aware that I am, as a representative of a large company, responsible to go hunt down a small and find someone to give 30% of $400 million to. So that often creates an ecosystem where smalls actually have quite an advantage. And if they have a differentiator and are skilled in this business, it is certainly not a license to print money, but you have a real opportunity, and representatives of companies like mine, the one I work for, are incentivized to reach out and find you. So what's important in a small is a fluency in these opportunities, and a business acumen as it relates to federal contracting is very achievable, even if right now today you don't have the faintest point where to start. And so that's what this talk is about. The other thing that's very important, I come at this from a very technology oriented slant. I work commonly with antennas that are pointed into space and the technology that's behind those. So kind of servers of sorts and that sort of thing. The commoditization of IT, or the fact that you can buy a firewall or you can buy this device and you don't have to invent it from scratch, even in the most high-end space systems, it's still commoditized, has really reduced the barriers to entry. So there's very little that stops a small. A small doesn't have to know what frequency a satellite talks on to help secure it. You may be able to work with partners like Cisco or other manufacturers of products, because the products have been commoditized so much that you're able to resell them or actually do the engineering work to install those for the federal government. And again, citing the earlier reference, if large companies like the one I represent are required to give 30% of our business to a small, that commoditized IT has really reduced the barrier, especially around space operations and mission engineering in the space and intelligence community. Dr. Christopher, just want to do a 5x5, just an audio check real quick, just to make sure we can still hear. And it's hard in not a physical forum like this.
Loud and clear.
Okay, all right. So in these kinds of forums, you never know when you're going to drop off, right, during COVID and remote. And so again, the point of me talking here is not to say, hey, I know everything, and you guys don't know anything. Listen to me. It's more to just light a fuse with the smalls who are here, hopefully attending or listening as a recording, to say, gosh, maybe this is something we should look at. And again, to encourage small business in the West Virginia community, who are industrious and hardworking people, to leverage the resources like the university around you to at least explore if some of these monies or this funding could make it to you. So that ultimately the sources we'll talk about later, like the Small Business Administration, or that's the formal group who would support you in this. But this is just to ignite your excitement about the opportunity, and also with the emerging space industry, but we'll get to that in a second. So on the screen, you'll see just a quick grab for some publicly available data. I've cited the NASA fiscal year 2020 procurement report. It's just publicly available to anyone on this call at www.nasa.gov. But as a small business, it's hard to know where to start and say to yourself, gosh, where do I begin? Like, how do I even get into this? I'm sitting here at home. It's COVID. I can't physically go meet with people. It's hard to travel. Well, a significant amount of the data you need to start to shape and understand where you might fit and as a federal supplier is available publicly. So on the screen are just some real quick screen grabs of a myriad of data out there that's available, but talks about how do I orient myself for what's called a pursuit or capture? How am I going to know what to go after? Well, there's tons of data out there to help you. And if you're willing to dig in, you can start to find it. That procurement data in this 2020 report cited here, you can see it categorizes, I'm pointing at the wrong screen on my screen, but what business firms got it, who bought what, where they bought it, what type of money was spent. And you can drill down on this, and then the government's already done this homework for you as a small. And they are more than happy to spoon feed this to all smalls to help you understand how to get in this business. Because again, under certain procurement guidelines, they have very big goals for engaging small business. So it behooves the federal government and companies like the one I'm currently employed by to do outreach to small businesses to get them excited, because we need them, because we can't do business without them. So this is an example, just some of the data that's out there and available. Additionally, there's kind of a nexus of events that's been occurring, over the past 10 years. Dr. Alan Taylor's on the call. I know Dr. Charlotte Webb is on the call from the Robert C. Byrd Institute, both of which are very plugged into technology. And then we have our business office friends over here from the College of Business who've been gracious enough to invite us. What's happened is technology, like everything from machining, precision manufacturing, through artificial intelligence, has become so commoditized that you no longer need to be an IT specialist to plug it into your problem, right? You don't have to be a hardcore, for lack of a better term, nerd like me to apply a business strategy. And through a small business in the region, connecting two resources like the university can kind of have the best of both worlds. You can plug into the Marshall University's new computer science programs, as well as the business side through the Brad C. Smith group, and basically take commoditized IT systems, right, and become a reseller, right, at the lowest level. That's the simplest, or becomes an integrator. The other thing is everything is software. In the space business right now, more and more you see this term coming up, but basically more and more things are software, right? So if you think of the Tesla car and the fact that it's very software driven and you can send an update to the car, we're moving in a direction where satellites, ground systems, weapons platforms, they're becoming that way. You don't actually mechanically upgrade the system as much as you software update it, or you augment it with additional AI or machine learning on the back end to do better target acquisition, for instance, or refine weather data from NOAA. Well, as you know, Marshall University runs a robust program, for computer science, and so in that we have that in the region, and that's another way that the commoditization of this and the shift in the industry makes these resources available to you. There's nothing that prevents a small from walking into Marshall University, having a great conversation with the professor and saying, hey, I'd like to talk to two students about doing a capstone with me, and we're going to go after this federal contract and try to do a prototype, right? And that gets into skilled workforce. Additionally, through Marshall University as well as regionally, there's a great deal of students who are very excited and want to become a part of this new emerging space community. All right. Well, the fact that the playing field has been leveled through federal acquisition regulation, through the commoditization of IT, those students have just as much of a chance as someone working in Pasadena beside the Jet Propulsion Lab do. Right? Those students have a fair and even playing field. And that skilled workforce for Java developers, for artificial intelligence, machine learning, data visualization, they're all available at Marshall. They're all available in this region, and they're chomping at the bit to be part of a small business, right? To be part of this emerging space economy. Additionally, it goes without saying that, everyone on this call knows, that there's an unprecedented ability to access and share and collaborate on information. So, COVID has really accelerated that for us, both in the industry, as well as just obviously in the markets at large. And then lastly, expansion of the space industry and the space economy. The space industry itself is, even in the newspapers, right? Laymen who are not in the business see the increasing launch cadence, the frequency with which we're putting birds in orbit, with, putting assets up, and that requires backside support. So as a small business, I'd say to myself, gosh, if there used to be this volume of business in space, and now it's doubling or tripling, projected to be a $1 trillion business in 2040, how do I get a piece of that action, right? Well, the way you get a piece of that action is you start to get into the federal space business, because getting into the private sector is possible, but we're just here to talk about the federal side right now. But this growing space economy is massive and requires additional resources over the next 20 years, and a small business can take advantage of that. The new space economy is projected to be $1 trillion annual by 2040. So that's an everything from a small business providing project managers to manage the upgrade of an antenna on Wallops Island, right, out on the east coast of Virginia, all the way through to supplying welders or materials, inspections for, this week I have an issue, not just I, but my team has an issue where there's an antenna on the east coast that had wind load and the antenna has cracked. And we have welders who are out with inspectors and engineers giving us a welding repair report to try to salvage that antenna. That's something a small business, we would happily engage a small business who could get someone out there and had that expertise. And again, I'm a little bit Tootsie Roll, but when I think of the Robert C. Byrd Institute down there and the services they provide, and as we look at our students in the Brad C. Smith School of Business right over from it, like, gosh, why do we not have some of these industrious kids out here who are graduating, engaging with RCBI, engaging with that, and able to start to do those types of weld repair cracking reports on ground systems for us, right? I would love to have that. That'd be wonderful, right? We do see an increase in launch cadence. Again, launches are occurring more and more frequently to support, basically what's a increased space economy. There's expanding civilian and DoD intel use of space infrastructure. So there's a left and a right hand of this business. The left-hand civilian tends to be things like NOAA, like crop yields, weather patterns, space weather, how a solar flare's other space weather may impact radio communications here on Earth, all the way through to DoD and intel. So the Department of Defense intelligence communities use a significant amount of space infrastructure to do what they do. There is the DoD and intel as well as civilian side. So that's NOAA, NASA, all the way through to what are called restricted agencies. All utilize space infrastructure, and small businesses, again, in all those cases, have a set aside portion of a contract that's very exciting that can be awarded to them. So if they want to be in this business, there's a lot of breadth and depth to their opportunity. Increased data collection continues. So we're seeing ever increasing amount of data collected. So again, back to that commoditized IT. If I were a small business and engaged in any way in the IT community, one way in to think about is, gosh, wouldn't it be great if all this data needs to be managed? It needs to be turned into information so business leaders can make a decision. Maybe I could play a role in that. Wonder where I fit in. And then additionally, space systems are critical to national infrastructure. I cited that from the INSA report. I kind of put that there for those of you smalls who might be interested in knowing where to pull a thread at. But then, the INSA report clearly says, look, U.S. space infrastructure is part of our critical infrastructure. It is critical to our national security and is critical to our economy. So if I were a small business thinking like, I wonder where my next 20 years of money is coming from, that's something to think about. And then service sources saw it range from cybersecurity to precision manufacturing to facilities management. So some of you may be on the call if you are small or you're listening on a recording and you say, gosh, as a service, as a small business right now, I just place a few project managers somewhere, or we really just do electrical work, right? All of these services are procured by the federal government. And not only that, the Small Business Award Program creates a situation where there are sometimes tendencies to prefer a small business to award this work to. So no matter what your small business capability is or your specialization, the sources precision manufacturing, all the way through literally at Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, Alabama. One of my friends, she runs the facilities contract where they do work for just to manage the facilities there. So Dr. Christopher, just doing another mic check. Can you still hear us okay?
You're doing good.
Okay. So one thing I always encourage smalls to do, I meet with a lot of smalls, like as indicated in the intro. I did, I'm not bragging. I'm just trying to say, I'd want to know who I was talking to if I were you folks. I won the Small Business Advocate of the Year, and it's because I'm always looking for new work. Again, our deals are 100 million up. So I've got to find, it behooves me to do my job well if I go find small businesses who do cool space stuff and can help me out. What I've found in those interactions over the past, say, 6 years or so, particularly in the 6 years I've been in the space piece of it, is the smalls often are embarrassed, or they feel uncomfortable, or they feel intimidated. So this slide is really kind of aimed in sharing some of my experience there to encourage you to act like you belong. Smalls often come and they're very sheepish, and they'll approach me at a mixer at an event, or so some small business event, NASA or NOAA or some other agency is holding, restricted agencies holding, and they'll come up and they'll almost apologize out of the first words out of their mouth. They'll be like, I'm sorry to bother you, Mr. McAllister. And I'm always embarrassed because I'm like, listen, like I'm not Peraton, or I'm not this all day, and you shouldn't be sheepish, right? You should act like you're supposed to be here, because I need you as much as you need me to do business. And you as a small should be encouraged to act like you belong. And some of those things include, again, remember, barriers to entry are smaller than a small business tends to expect. I am incentivized to win my deals and to deliver services to our customers of space intelligence nature, to go aggressively find smalls who are good at their job. So a small business has just as big a seat at the table as I do, right? I might represent a company that has 22,000 employees, but at the end of the day, we're both going to sit across the table from each other and negotiate a teaming agreement where you have as much leverage as I do in this deal to tell me how much you think you should get, why you think you should get it, and what you should do. So remember, barriers to entry are lower. We're incentivized. The company I work for, Paraton, and all major federal contractors are incentivized to use small business and subcontractors to meet our small business targets. I have to do it. It's not up to me. It's the federal government is mandating that if we want to be in this business, I have to use small. So again, you belong, and you should act like you belong. And then innovation comes from the strangest and smallest places. I was going to steal a real exciting slide from NASA, and then I elected not to, just for ease of use of this presentation. But NASA has a great slide from the 2020 rover mission to Mars, and that slide is a picture of the rover, and then on the rover are circled the parts that were produced, manufactured, or developed by a small business. And it's I can't remember the total TCV, the total contract value, but whatever the TCV for that mission was, a huge amount of those devices were developed actually by small businesses. And I can share that, Dr. Christopher, it's not in the end, but innovation comes from the smallest places. Often NASA, NOAA, and our restricted customers actually get some of the coolest innovative ideas from smalls, because smalls aren't restricted by being this mega corporation who can sometimes be slow to move. So I cannot encourage a small who has an innovative or a novel idea, especially around space and intelligence work in particular, to really just bite into that idea. Use the College of Business, use the Marshall University resources that are nearby, use RCBI, get with people, talk to them, and say, gosh, I have this great idea, right? Because innovation comes from the smallest and strangest of places. And I can say that and having witnessed it, right? But that Curiosity rover, the drill head, the cameras, many of those aspects were developed at least collaboratively with an innovative small. Again, you're equally deserving of a seat at the table. I will say this in the Act Like You Belong, one of the things you can best do, it's almost like asking for a prom date. Confidence counts, right? Now, cockiness doesn't count, but confidence does. So, if you work with Marshall University's College of Business and people like Dr. Cristofero and kind of this expertise she has that was, in the earlier part of the presentation, developing an acumen to engage with large businesses like the one I represent, right? We appreciate when you come correct, what I would call come correct. When you come and you have your capability statement ready, you're clearly defining what your goals are and your capabilities, like just Dr. Cristofero talked about. You are saying, this is what we're good at, and this is what we can help you with. And you have a clear elevator pitch, because often in these events, the last one I was at just before COVID that was really an event, there were probably 2,000 people in the room, right? And as soon as I slapped that Paraton badge on, that basically represents hundreds of millions of dollars to smalls. And again, that's not me, that's the company I work for. So to be clear, that's, from an economics perspective, I don't get any, power trip out of that. But I do enjoy trying to help smalls. And when you think about the West Virginia region and how industrious people are and how excited they are to do a good job and the good work ethic, I couldn't tell you how good it would be to be at one of those events and have a West Virginia company walk up to us, come correct, bring the capability statement, have that elevator pitch ready, and say, here's what I can help you do, and here are the 3 pursuits that I looked up I think I can help you with. They drop on October 20th, and then 2022, this on 2023, and how exciting, we're ready to deliver for you. So come correct, be engaged and professional, and large businesses will usually be respectful of that. And then lastly, in the Act Like You Belong, agency and industry matchmaking events facilitate contacts with the largest players. And we'll talk about that at the end. But when you say, like, how do I do that, right? How do I act like I belong? Where do I even start? There are tons of agency-based matchmaking events for small businesses that the SBA or the agency's small business outreach can help you with. But I would really encourage you to do that. And again, I couldn't stress enough, leverage the Marshall universities around you to develop how you're going to go about that, and the SBA. Force multipliers, so I'll pause here for a second and just, recognize 2 people on the call. Dr. Alan Taylor, I think he's still on the call, was a mentor of mine when I was a Marshall student. He's meant a lot to me about, understanding what the art of possible was as a professional, as someone who came from the region, lives in Taze Valley currently. Dr. Alan Taylor did a good job of helping to shape the art of possible in my mind, right? Charlotte Weber, I actually worked for Charlotte. She may not remember that, a long time ago as a student in the early 90s at RCBI. And those experiences with people like that were absolutely critical in my mind, to shaping what I thought the art of possible was from a career perspective. And I would just say to small businesses out there that it may feel like those little moments of truth with people like Ms. Weber, like Dr. Alan Taylor, are just small moments of truth. But you have Dr. Langton here on the call, people like that who can definitely participate and help you to have moments of truth like that. And you can't predict what a force multiplier that is to a small business. Also, RCBI, nonprofits, agency, small business. I have some links at the end. Then I'll hit on this one as we kind of close, because it's about 10:40. SBI or STTR is a formal program that each agency runs. The Small Business Administration, or the SBA, and then almost all large businesses. The company I work for, Peraton, Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, Leidos, Accenture, Deloitte, they all run a team inside the company. You can't see I'm talking with my hands, to reach out to small businesses, and their entire job in life is to do that. So dig into these force multipliers and see how they can help you. If you're a small business, you might feel overwhelmed with this, right? This conversation is kind of a lot, even in person. You're like, oh gosh, I'm hearing these numbers. It's 400, 500, it's 1.2 billion TCV. Like I can't even process that, right? I'm a small business in Proctorville, and right now I just have a small plant where I ship things and we do some electronics. Yep, I totally get that. I've been with many of you, right? Like across the country. It can be daunting, right? But success is possible. Again, to reiterate, larges and the agencies are incentivized to use smalls. So the table is already slightly tilted in your advantage. It will take patience. You will have to create, this isn't a tomorrow thing, right? So you don't suddenly get into federal contracting and expect to win an award within the next, 6 months. It's not going to happen, right? So this is a long ball. Business acumen matters. Again, what I said earlier, using the university to help develop what Dr. Cristofero, Dr. Langton, the teams on this call can help you with, the RCBI, they know how to do business, right? Let them help you and be a force multiplier. I don't want to paint too rosy of a picture. To be honest with you, not every small succeeds in this business. I've seen really good ideas where someone had a crazy great idea for space operations, but they just couldn't get the business side down. Again, that's why I come back to the Brad C. Smith School of Business. You can be the best technologist there is and still go bankrupt, right? And that is very important to remember. And again, when I talk about the university, where they come into play with this as an influencer, they can help you. So when you want to up your chance of success, think about that. And then just an exciting part, if you want to, think about what's the next for West Virginia, right? What's next for the people in our region who are smalls? Be part of the next generation of space operations, right? Think about, gosh, wouldn't it be great if 10 years from now I was sitting here running a mid-sized business, because it wouldn't be small anymore, right? Supplying Goddard Space Flight Center or Glenn Research Center in Cleveland with wind tunnel testing models, or working with RCBI to CNC out components for the next space mission that are, going as flight hardware, right? That are going to be going into lunar orbit here pretty soon with Artemis, right? That would be great. And these things are available here in this region, and the industriousness in the region is here. So, be excited about it. The space stuff, I happen to be near and dear to my heart, space and intelligence, but it's a lot of fun. It makes you want to go to work every day, and it's a small, I think that's important. And then lastly, I'd say contribute to national security, right? Agencies face increasing threats on all fronts. I won't go too far into this, but it's very important to remember that, we are still a nation that is attacked by nation state actors on the regular, as well as, individual actors. If you want to be a part of defending this nation, right, in a modern way, it's not all M1 Abrams tanks anymore, right? Some of this stuff is done digitally. Then be a part of that, right? Get engaged. If you have a patriotic slant to what you want to do, you don't have to build cannons anymore, right? You can be a part of national security and contribute to the security of this nation and the security of peace, right? By participating in these types of operations as a small. We're running out of time because I've been a little windy, Dr. Langton, but I'll just blast through this. There are a number of places to begin. Like Dr. Cristofero said, know your capability. Engage with each agency's small business, engage with the Small Business Administration, engage with the agency small businesses, attend their events. They're available. COVID's made it very accessible through webinars like this to attend. Increase your vocabulary and use force multipliers like the university and the Robert C. Byrd Institute. You may only be 3 people, but you're not. If you walk into Dr. Langton's office and say, hey, I'd like to talk about shaping my business strategy. And she says, well, maybe we can find 2 students in there that'll do it as their capstone, right? You'd be surprised at how far that goes. If you get down to Miss Weber's facility at the RCBI, I go there. It's a hobby of mine, right? There's guys who used to work at Sikorsky Sikorsky and other helicopter rotary wing manufacturers, which are part of aerospace, like massive skill down there. Go find those force multipliers and engage them. And suddenly you're not a 3-person small business. You're a 3-person small business in West Virginia with a huge work ethic and access to university and RCBI to be force multipliers. I've embedded some links. I won't go through them here, but I've talked a lot about a number of things. This is not an exhaustive list. It's just a starting point. Your local SBA or Small Business Administration PTAC, which there is a PTAC in the region, it can do a way better job of this than I can, but this is going to be posted as my understanding. So I just embedded some things that I love. Everything from the Air Force's Technology and Transfer Program to NOAA Small Business to NASA's procurement forecast. You can go and see what are they buying next year, right? At all 10 centers, and it's massive. And you can say, gosh, I didn't know they did that. I didn't know they needed someone to monitor the PLC controls for the wind tunnel. Well, they do, and they would love to have us do it. So Dr. Langton, and then there's a couple things in there, space industry fluency. If you want to start to become fluent in space operations, and that's something you want to start to trend toward, right? It doesn't hurt to dabble your toe. I just cited a couple of simple reports. There's tons of information out there, but these are 2 good places. Space Policy Primer, Key Concepts, Issues and Actors. Can't encourage you enough to read that. Intelligence for National Security Report, and then I threw a Space News article in there just for the fun of it, just so you can kind of start to pull at those threads. So Dr. Langton, I apologize for going about 5 over, or level of enthusiasm. Again, I would just acknowledge Dr. Alan Taylor and Charlotte Weber. Really appreciate both of them. Again, I grew up there. I'm still growing up there thanks to them. I hope I'm getting better as I get older, but really pleased, and I'd like to appreciate the university, the things they've done for me, and just if there's anything I can do to give back, happy to.
Thanks, Jonathan and Tracy, for an enthusiastic, informative, and insightful presentation today. It'll help with all of us small businesses think about how to get involved in federal contracts. And thanks for all the links and references that you cited. I'll now read some of the questions that were posted during the event and some that were sent in before. So the first question is, are there companies that could provide us small businesses guidance, or we could engage as consultants to help us tap into expertise to increase our small businesses' fluency in the federal contracting business? So they want to know about consultants that will help them.
Yep. So Dr. Langton, I'll try to practice brevity here. The short answer is yes, there are consultants like that. And the longer answer is exercise extreme caution. The business is full of little snake oil salesmen who pop up, and they will come to a small business and say, for $10,000, I'll get you a list of all of NASA's procurements for next year. Well, thanks, but I can do that myself. And not only that, the Small Business Administration, or the SBA, which most of you as smalls are probably aware of, will help you for free, right? Not only that, Marshall University will. So those consultants do exist. I would exercise extreme caution when someone's coming to help, when I put that in quotes, but for money. When someone's coming to help, what's their incentive? So I would encourage you to try to use the free resources that are available through the SBA, through each agency's small business outreach, and then through companies like Peraton that I work for, or Leidos, or Lockheed, or Raytheon, to their small business office. And those consultants, as a general practice, should be pretty far down the list of preferred methods.
Okay, great. Thank you for that answer. Another question is, you mentioned using universities and other organizations as force multipliers. How would a small business get the attention of a university to ask for help, and what form might that take?
So that's a good question. So one of the ways, so obviously here through Marshall University, I believe Marshall University is one of the more open universities. So I think contacting people on this list, or the Robert C. Byrd Institute, are good starts, and just asking questions, saying, hey, where do I begin? Is there an interest, right? Attending events, functions the university holds to understand a little about what they offer. The form that it might take, I currently engage Virginia Tech at this time in a number of activities on behalf of various space-oriented agencies within the civilian intelligence community to do software development. So we may hire students who are graduate students to do software development. We may engage students to do research studies. We did one a couple years ago where we wanted to augment scientists with AI and machine learning, well, with AI to speed up their research. So if I'm researching something as a scientist, like attitude control for something that flies, for lack of a better term, is there somewhere the scientist or the engineer can be helped or assisted? Well, the university did a prototype for us on that. As we look at, again, IT has continued to encroach, commoditized IT has. So like traditional software development is used for space missions, right? It's not anything special. Universities are very good at that. And so driving into universities to shape the next generation of workforce and go work with the academics to shape the academic program to say, gosh, we need 7 Java developers, but they need to be fluent in AWS. Maybe you can get students to do that, and that can be a pipeline for staffing for your small business. Those are just some examples.
Great, thanks. I have 2 kind of related questions. The first one is with regard to the space industry. Our company doesn't do anything high tech like aerospace manufacturing or national security level cybersecurity. Is there any work for us that we could explore? And the related question is, what's the typical number of companies you have vying for one contract? And what's your most typical contract? Like what product?
Okay, yeah, so I'll take the second question first. What's our typical product and number of companies? So the company I currently work for, Peraton, we do everything from IT all the way through to manufacture sounding rockets, which are also used for other purposes. So we may hire companies who, on the far right extreme, manufacture highly specialized cables that are radiation hardened, and basically maintain signal quality while in space and being exposed to high levels of radiation. All the way on the left, we may hire companies, like I said earlier, where we need someone to go out and inspect the backplate on an antenna on Wallops Island for a crack, and we may discuss with them, I'm making that one up, but just we may discuss with them, hey, what do you think the best repair approach is, and we hire them. We also hire smalls to supply us with project managers or to subject matter expertise in IT. So for instance, there's a tool called Splunk, which is an IT tool, a very specific IT tool. And we'll hire people specifically to work on that platform. And if a small business is very, very good at that, like that's a specific case I can cite, we will what's called bid them on a contract. So when I need to set aside out of that 400 million, X% for smalls, if you come and you say, listen, I'm really, really good with Splunk, right? Or I'm really, really good. I've got a couple project managers that work for me that are very good at their jobs. We'll give you that what's called work share or that work stream, and then say, we're going to give you X heads on the program. Normally on a deal that's say 400 million or up, like ballpark numbers, we usually will have it varies, and it's a little bit trade secret, so we won't say a number, or a specific number, but it could vary as few as 3 small businesses partnered up to, let's call it 10, right? 10 to 12. And again, that's a little bit of secret sauce, so we won't get into the details unless you're under an NDA with us, but generally 3 to 10 smalls. And then remember, we are just one company bidding. We're probably bidding against competimates of ours. Like we may bid against a Lockheed, for instance, or a Raytheon. But then other times we may team with them. So it varies wildly. It is a competitive environment, and that's why it's important that you do what Dr. Christopher said, which is find your niche, be very good at it, so that you crush and run everyone else out of the business. You push them out just by your delivery quality, which I'm very confident everyone in West Virginia can do just by sheer work ethic alone. So.
Great. Another question wants to know about paperwork. The question reads, I've heard that doing work for federal contracts requires a lot of paperwork. As a small business, we are not staffed to address huge increases in administrative overhead while running our current business. How do small businesses beat this?
So that's a common, that's the critical, to reach a critical mass and actually be in the business, right? There's some truth in that, right? You remember that part at the beginning where it said significant rigor and structure exists around federal government procurement requirements. One of the challenges there is to have rigor almost inherently means bureaucracy, right? Or paperwork or procedures. And they're not always the smoothest, right? It is the federal government space, and there's some rigor around that creates paperwork. Working with your SBA, Small Business Administration, PTAC or similar, can help you navigate some of those formal paperwork requirements. And while they can feel burdensome, they can be overcome. They've become almost mythical. In my interactions with small businesses, it's almost a mythic level, right? The reality is, yeah, there's some paperwork, but it's not remotely impossible. It is not beyond the barrier of reasonableness. And also work with, again, back to Dr. Langton and Dr. Christopher, back to that. Well, gosh, what prevents you from going to your local SBA and also engaging with some students to help develop your business plan? Or if you need to understand what a 533 is or a facility DD254, I think it is. Those things are things that you could work with students to augment you or use force multipliers. The Bird Institute, I mean, when I worked there in 93, we were doing that kind of stuff, right? We were helping companies understand procurement requirements and navigate that. So yes, it is a little burdensome, but it should not be enough to prevent you from trying to do it.
Okay, great. Our next question, this is probably our last question here today, is our company is a small business with a very specialized niche skill, such as software development for mobile devices, or we work on PLC controls for industrial use. Our focus area is very specific in terms of what we do. How would we find out who in the federal government space industry is even interested in these services? So I think they're asking, is there any way they could search for contracts that would be needing their skills or product?
Yes, so absolutely, right? So that's really common, and those are people on this call probably know, there are what are called NAICS codes, NAICS codes, that categorize the services the government buys, and there are other ways to do that too. We won't get it. I'm not the SBA, so I'm not as good as the SBA about citing chapter and verse that particular scripture, but yes, absolutely. So for instance, on this links page, if you look, there's a NASA procurement forecast, and you can actually, any US citizen, or actually anyone, I don't think it's restricted to CONUS now. You can go click that, download an Excel sheet, and it actually sorts exactly what they're going to buy, and it's usually by NAICS code. So you could categorize it from facilities management to selling, hydrazine or other types of rocket fuel, right? All the way through to, gosh, we need someone who will build us a document management system for our invoices at the government, right? So absolutely, you could find that. And that is usually step one that a small goes through with a small business administrator, PTAC. So going to the SBA. But if you just wanted to do a quick cursory look, you can go to these NOAA links, NASA links, Space Force. I can't encourage you enough to look at the Space Force link that's at the bottom, which is Peterson Air Force Base, and see what they're buying, right? And does it align with you? Now, the inverse of that is if you have a highly, highly innovative idea. So like, for instance, talking about publicly available unclassified. It's no secret, and it's publicly available information that Glenn Research Center in Cleveland, Ohio runs some really cool wind tunnels, right? For in-atmosphere studies. So think like airplanes, and I know Marshall has a great, very exciting new aerospace program coming up, right? If your deal is so niche and so specialized and innovative, it may not be in that procurement projection. But the SBIR, STTR, and those things there, you can take those new ideas to Glenn and say, listen, I have a great new idea for how we're going to analyze the data coming out of this wind tunnel in a way that processes it more quickly, gives you more granular information, it's more accurate. That's the inverse, right? When there's not an idea like that. And you can do that as well. So there's the yes, go look at what they're already buying. And that's the non-innovation answer. Like, I want to do things they already buy. And then there's the innovation answer, which is I have this crazy, great new idea. I need to get it in, and that's where SBIR, STTR come in. Dr. Christopher, I think you came off mute. Oh, I didn't know if you were going to say something.
No, I'm just here. I think we're just wrapping it up.
Okay, yes. Thank you very much, Jonathan and Tracy, for an enthusiastic, informative, and insightful presentation. We really appreciate all this interesting information on how to engage in a federal contract. This wraps it up for today's and this semester's Herd Insight Small Business Webinar Series. Be on the lookout for us next semester. And again, we appreciate the audience's participation today. And always remember, we are Marshall.